We have reached the final weekend of August, but there are still a good handful of interesting players entering the player pool in your fantasy baseball league. We've got our favorite call-ups for the week here for you on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Saturday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, brought to you by Chalkboard. Erik Halterman and Ryan Boyer here for the final Fab Pickup Pod of August. Only 3-4 more after this? We're really coming down to the wire. I know you don't have any Fab dollars left, Ryan, but we've got a decent number of interesting guys still this week for everybody else.
Yeah, still some with that August 15th cutoff, players are interesting. Some interesting players are magically ready for the big leagues now. So we're getting some good call-ups, especially from on the pitching side. And I left a couple of those interesting young pitchers for you this week.
Yeah, we will have some interesting young pitchers, particularly in the priority ad section. Might be a little bit tougher to find compelling hitters in deeper leagues this week, even in shallower leagues, but we'll get to that in a minute. As always, we like to start with the headlines, which includes a potentially worrying one for Nick Kurtz, who left Friday's game against Texas with right oblique soreness. Now, soreness isn't one of the bad words necessarily. Oblique, though, not a word you really want to see associated with a hitter, especially this time of year. If this turns out to be an oblique strain and not just oblique soreness, I mean, oblique strains are 6 weeks, and we only got 5 or less. So if this does turn out to be a strain, this is probably the end of the season for Kurtz, which would really be too bad. But I imagine if you've got him on any of your teams, you can't call this a drop until we see that this is definitely a strain, because Kurtz has been too good to take that chance.
Yeah, I guess if there's a silver lining, the timing is kind of good for it to happen at this point, because the A's could give him a couple days to see if he recovers, and then we should hopefully find out whether an IL stint is required prior to lineup locks next week. I did notice that he said it wasn't a sudden, it happened at one point that he felt the oblique had kind of been creeping up on him for several days. I guess that's better that he didn't feel it on one particular swing. Although, I mean, as you mentioned, anytime the oblique is involved, worrisome, especially for a hitter that's been, one of the best hitters in baseball for the last few months. I guess we assume Tyler Soderstrom, if Kurtz has to miss time, as Tyler Soderstrom headed back to first base. Maybe that means more playing time for Colby Thomas, who's actually been hitting well lately, but he really hasn't been playing all that much. So he could have some utility, especially in deeper leagues, if he finds himself in the lineup on a regular basis, given that friendly home environment he has in Vegas or in Sacramento. But yeah, we'll see. We'll keep a close eye on the news for Kurtz this weekend. Hopefully we'll find out. Maybe he'll be back in the lineup tonight. Maybe he'll be in the lineup tomorrow, but hopefully before lineup lock, we'll have more information.
Yeah, if this is the end of the season for Kurtz, he will lock in a batting average north of 300, an OBP north of 400, an OPS north of 1,000. But he'll be stuck on 27 homers in 94 games. Really hope that he has the chance to get over 30. A 30 homer, 300 season for a rookie would just be incredible. We've got more injury news here. A couple of veteran shortstops to talk about, starting with Xander Bogaerts, who hit the IL yesterday, Friday, with a non-displaced fracture in his left foot. This came after he fouled a ball off that foot Wednesday against Seattle. He stayed in to finish that contest, but later tests revealed a fracture, which I guess indicates that it's a minor break. Well, that's what non-displaced already indicated, I suppose. But this time of year, even a minor break, not guaranteed Bogarts returns this season, and he obviously is not producing on the same level as Nick Kurtz. So do we drop Xander Bogarts this weekend?
Yeah, I think it's fine to drop him. I mean, he's reached 20 steals. That's I think a career high for him. But I mean, pretty ordinary hitter at this point in his career. Xander Bogaerts is. He's fairly replaceable. I mean, any kind of fracture at this point of the season, you think it's probably a season ender. It seems like he does have a history of kind of healing quickly. I know he came back from that fractured shoulder a little quicker than most people would, but don't know that necessarily means anything. You know, the situation the Padres are in, he's going to push to come back before the end of the season. But if he does, it's probably just a couple of open games late in the year. Jose Iglesias steps in at shortstop for the Padres. I mean, I don't know that he's that much of a downgrade, honestly, from Bogarts. Not having a good year at the plate, though. Maybe because he's going to get some everyday playing time for the next several weeks. He's a somewhat interesting in deeper leagues, but that magic he kind of captured late last year with the Mets is very much dissipated in 2025.
Yeah, Iglesias' batting average down over 100 points from last season, from 337 to 233. Maybe he's moved on to focusing on his music career or something. Not a particularly compelling pickup outside of very deep leagues. One more injured veteran shortstop to talk about here. I guess, does this count as an injury? It's an appendectomy for Corey Seager. And man, this just kind of fits his reputation of Corey Seager's always missing time with something. It's not really that he's got one bad knee or elbow or something. It's just one thing after another. I guess if I had to pick a guy who was going to get appendectomy, I think I might actually say probably Corey Seager, the way things tend to go with him. This is a harder call on whether or not to drop because Seager obviously offers more than Bogarts. The news is that he's expected to miss a few weeks. We don't have a long list of appendectomies to figure out the exact timeline for when guys can play baseball again, though. Are you holding on to Corey Seager?
I mean, if possible, but it might depend on where the Rangers are in a few weeks. I mean, they're still theoretically in the playoff race. If they fade over the next few weeks, which, I mean, the looks of their lineup right now and their rotation, I mean, they're really banged up. So I could see them kind of nosediving over these next few weeks and then not having much of a reason to try to push Corey Seager to return late in the season. I mean, the history with appendectomies as far as timelines to return, you would think he would have a decent shot to make it back, but, you know, unlike Bogarts, Seager doesn't have a reputation of being a quick healer. But it kind of just depends on your situation. Ideally, obviously, you'd be able to hang on to him, but you know, we're running out of days here on the calendar, so I'm not gonna lose sleep if I have to cut him.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, we've already got a handful of the names that we're going to talk about today being discussed in the chat, so I think it's time to move on to our priority ads of the week. Starting on the mound, where I have to say the priority pitchers are probably the most interesting part of this weekend's waiver pickups. So who is your top guy, Ryan?
Yeah, I mentioned that I was kind of leaving the exciting young pitchers for Erik this week, but Kyle Bradish, still pretty young, still pretty exciting, as he showed in his first start back from Tommy John against the Red Sox. He had kind of so-so results on his rehab assignment. I think he had one outing where he went like 5 scoreless and struck out 9, but other than that, it was pretty meh. But I mean, he looked awesome against the Red Sox. 6 innings, a couple runs. I think he gave up 2 solo home runs, and that was it. No walks, 10 strikeouts. The velocity was pretty much right in line with his pre-Tommy John velo. his primary 2 off-speed pitches, the slider and curveball, there were 15 swings at those 2 pitches in the outing and 11 swings and misses. So Red Sox took a shot at it 15 times and missed 11 times. He had 16 whiffs in total on 81 pitches. Pretty good rate there. And if you need a reminder on how Kyle Bradish was trending prior to surgery, 38 starts from 2023 to 2024, 2.81 ERA, 104 whip, 221 to 59, strikeout to walk rate over 200 and 8 innings. Very exciting young pitcher. And well, he's 28 now. He's not young, but still relatively young. And looks like the velo's back. Looks like the command, at least for that start against the Red Sox, was back. Orioles are going to operate with a 6-man rotation for the rest of the season. So it looks like Bradish is still going to get in 1 2-start week as the schedule currently sets up. But his starts will be a little more spaced out, but that's okay. It might maybe ideal as he comes back from Tommy John anyway. And I think he's virtually a must roster across the board down the stretch.
Yeah, I would definitely say he is a must roster. It's a little bit tricky with these guys coming back from elbow surgery this time of year because, as we talk about pretty often, when pitchers come back from surgery, they're not generally at their best for the first several starts, sometimes even the first year. You'd love to have the luxury of adding a guy and then giving him a couple starts to prove that he deserves to be in your lineup, but you just don't really have that kind of time at this time of year. So the fact that Bradish looked so good in his first start, I think is key. I think you can definitely add him and just throw him right back in there, aware of the risks, but he doesn't seem like he's having one of those very difficult returns, at least through one outing. I am going to go to an exciting young pitcher who just made his MLB debut yesterday for the Mets, and that is Jonah Tong, a 22-year-old righty with a wild delivery. Gets some Tim Lincecum comparisons. If you've watched this guy pitch, his head is like fully sideways when he releases the ball. Doesn't even look like he's looking at the plate. I don't really understand how he made it to the majors throwing like this, but he also struck out over 40% of batters he faced in his 22 minor league starts this season, did Jonah Tong. His minor league numbers aren't too dissimilar from, say, a Jacob Mizorowski, with absurd strikeout rates combined with too many walks, to be sure. A 10.5% walk rate for Tong in the minors this season, although he didn't walk any in his MLB debut last night. Electric stuff here. It's not Mizorowski level velocity, a 95-mile-per-hour fastball, but this is a guy with great stuff, plenty of prospect pedigree. He was up to 23rd on James Anderson's latest top 400 prospects, which, by the way, were updated just 3 days ago, if you want to check those out. Now, there are questions about whether or not Jonah Tong has a rotation spot the rest of the season. Nolan McLean, who's been mentioned in the chat, is also newly added to this rotation and has looked excellent. Right now, it would have to be a 6-man for them to both stick around. But with Tong's absurd strikeout stuff in the minors and his excellent debut start, I should mention he did actually give up 4 runs against the Marlins, but 3 of them were unearned. 6 hits, struck out 6, and again, 0 walks in 5 innings. Looks hard to send him back down, I would say, and I think I'd be making Tong a priority pickup this weekend. But we should ask the question that's been asked in the chat here: Nolan McLean or Jonah Tong? If you're in one of those leagues where McLean hasn't been snapped up yet, people wanted to see more than just 3 starts, I guess. Which guy would you take, Ryan?
Oh, I'm going McLean out of the 2 of them. I mean, he's just looked phenomenal. Tong looked good last night. I have McLean ranked higher. I think he's probably, especially since he's made a handful of starts already, more locked into a rotation spot. The Mets also have Tyler McGill on his way back, and he's been pretty decent this season. I know he's going to make one more rehab start. If we look at the the RotoWire pitching grid, we have Tong projected next Friday at Cincinnati. Not a great matchup. And then he's off the board after that, after we have Tyler McGill coming back. So maybe it'll work out that way. Maybe it won't. I could see them moving Clay Holmes to the bullpen. I mean, he's obviously got experience there. I don't know if they gave him any assurances that he would remain in the rotation all season or how that works, but don't think Tong is necessarily guaranteed a rotation spot rest of season, but super high upside. I do prefer McLean out of the two, though.
Yeah, fair enough. And I think I agree with you on Clay Holmes. If there is a path for both Tong and McLean to stick around the rest of the season, especially after McGill returns, I'm pretty sure Holmes to the bullpen will be part of that. I haven't seen any indication that that's imminent, but the way he's been fading as the season has gone on in his first year back as a starter, it would just seem to make too much sense. I mean, if the Mets could get him back to being what Clay Holmes was as a reliever the past few seasons and add that high leverage arm to the bullpen too, got to mention they'd be pretty excited about that. But speaking of bullpens, you've got a priority reliever for us?
I do. Abner Uribe stepping in as the Brewers closer with Tyler McGill, the other McGill, Trevor McGill, going down with a flexor strain. They're saying it's a grade 1 strain, and I mean, McGill is hoping to come back when his 15 days are up, but that's obviously far from a guarantee. McGill had already been kind of fading a bit in August. You wonder how long that elbow had been bothering him. And Uribe's been awesome this season. 1.68 ERA, 78 to 24 strikeout to walk rate, over 64 in a third innings. He's picked up 3 saves, 35 holds. That easily leads all of baseball if you're in a holds league. He's been kind of remarkably consistent given his reputation as a potentially volatile guy, especially from a control perspective. Only 1 month with a sub-2 ERA this season. That was in June with a 3.55, and he had a 16 to 4 strikeout to walk rate in 12 2/3 innings that month. 13 scoreless appearances so far in August, well over a strikeout per inning during that time. I think the bugaboo with Uribe previously, in addition to those control problems, he's had some injury issues. I know he had some nagging knee stuff. He's had at least 1 knee surgery, I know. But put the injury issues behind him. He's throwing strikes at a 9.5% walk rate he has this season. I mean, if you're a starter, that's a little higher than you'd like, but the reliever profile that Uribe represents, that 9.5%, is plenty good enough from a control perspective. He's got elite velocity, gets elite whiffs on those sliders, elite ground ball rate. I mean, he's basically just putting it together as one of the better relievers in baseball. So we don't know when McGill is going to come back exactly, but Uribe, I think, has the potential, if McGill's recovery comes along more slowly than expected, I think Uribe could be an elite closer down the stretch. And even if has to step back into that setup role, still pretty useful from a fantasy perspective in deeper leagues.
Yeah, Uribe has been excellent this season. I do just want to mention, if you sort the Brewers bullpen by leverage index when they enter the game, it's actually Nick Mears and not Abner Uribe who has been used in the second highest leverage situations so far. So I suppose there's a chance in those deep leagues that you want to grab Nick Mears too, just in case he's the guy, but it would have to be Abner Uribe if I was the one making these decisions. His numbers have been excellent in a way that Mears's certainly haven't been. So I would be looking to grab Abner Uribe wherever I needed saves for sure. But back to the starters, we've got another exciting rookie who debuted yesterday. That is Peyton Tolley of the Red Sox, who is 1 spot behind Jonah Tong on James's top 400 prospects. Tolley ranks 24th on that latest update. You can use promo code YouTube15 for 15% off a subscription to RotoWire.com if you want to check out James's top 400 prospect list and everything else we've got going on there. But Peyton Tolley, who just got the call for the Red Sox, Looked good in his MLB debut against the Pirates. Still counts, even though it's against the Pirates. Allowed 2 runs on 3 hits and 2 walks while striking out 8 across 5 1/3 innings. By the way, got to debut against Paul Skeens, at least the second pitcher who's gotten to do that this year after Mick Abel. I think the ceiling should be higher for Peyton Tolley than it was for Mick Abel. This is a guy who rose incredibly fast through the system. Was a second-round pick in 2024, but did not pitch in his first professional season. He began this year at high A with 11 outings, then 6 more at double A, then just 3 at triple A. And that's all we have of his professional experience prior to his MLB debut. But, man, the numbers were excellent. In those 20 outings, a 3.04 ERA, an 0.99 whip, striking out 37% of opposing batters while walking just 6%. I mentioned with Jonah Tong, you get the absurd strikeout rates with some shaky control. With Tolley has looked excellent in both the strikeouts and the walks this season. Really encouraged to see what he can do. As far as opportunity, well, Walker Buehler was just released. Richard Fitz is out with an elbow injury. He was thought to be maybe a candidate for taking that spot from Buehler. I think we talked about him and Kyle Harrison last week, and it was neither of them. It's Peyton Tolley. I'm pretty intrigued to see what he can do. This, again, a very fast rise through the system. So it's possible the best version of Peyton Tolley is still a couple years away. But, pitchers can move quickly once they figure it out, and it sure looks like he has. So where would you rank Tolley compared to Jonah Tong?
I think I put Tolley ahead of him just because there's a better chance he's going to remain in the rotation. I mean, you kind of laid it out there that with Fitz probably not going to come back anytime soon. Buehler released, clearer path for Tolley to keep that rotation job rest of season. I mean, we saw him pumping 98, 99 early in the game. That adrenaline kind of wore off. He was more 94 towards the end of the game, but still an impressive debut, and he's obviously got some big upside. You don't know if that's going to happen, if he's going to click right away, but certainly a good first start for Peyton Tolley. I'm going to stick with the relief side again. For my next recommendation, another closer stepping in, Ryan Walker with the Giants. Randy Rodriguez, unfortunately, looking like he's headed for Tommy John surgery. So Walker, I even though I think Uribe is probably a better pitcher right now, I think I'd prioritize Walker ahead of him just because he's got a virtually assured of the closer job rest of season. Bad start to the season for Ryan Walker, lost the closer job, but he's been pretty good the last couple of months. Really good, actually, the last couple of months. Since July 1st, he's got a 1.77 ERA, whip just over 1, 23-5, strikeout to walk rate over 20 1/3 innings. You look at the Baseball Savant page, the stuff looks pretty much the same. Velo, spin rate, all of that. He's just been lacking on slider whiffs as compared to last season. But ground ball rate up over 50%. Still great at inducing weak contact. The hard hit rate, the average exit velocity, barrel rate, all in the 90th percentile or higher. So, I mean, I think Ryan Walker is basically the same pitcher as last year, or at least he has been the last couple of months. So the Giants have been kind of in free fall mode, but they're still good enough to produce some save chances. And Ryan Walker has pretty much got a lockdown on that closer job rest of season. So I think he should be definitely picked up if you're in need of saves.
Yeah, I think with the benefit of hindsight, we maybe should have been able to see that the chances of Walker losing that closer job early in the season were more significant than we thought back in draft season, mostly just because he's a sinker baller, and teams often like to use sinker ballers in the 7th or 8th inning when they're man on first base to try to get that double play. It seems to be the best way to deploy those guys. So maybe it shouldn't have shocked us that he fell out of the role when the Giants had other high leverage arms performing just as well. But Camilo Doval is in New York. Randy Rodriguez is on the operating table, and Ryan Walker is still a very good pitcher, even if he's, again, maybe not ideally suited for the ninth inning, he's still very good, and it's better to use a guy who's not an ideal fit but is very talented than to use, I don't even know who the other options are there, Joey Lucchesi, Spencer Bivens. Yeah, I think it's going to be Ryan Walker the rest of the season. Moving on to some priority hitters, we've got another exciting call up here. Jordan Lawler is finally back in the majors and presumably should be here to stay at this point, with Arizona having sold off at the deadline, creating some space for Lawler to play every day now that he's healthy again. We kind of thought we might see him sooner, but he was out with a hamstring injury at the deadline and remained in the minors for a couple weeks, ramping back up once healthy. But I would expect Jordan Lawler to be basically an everyday starter the rest of the way. He started at third base in his return to the majors yesterday, Friday. That game did not go well. He went 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts, which means Jordan Lawler, for his career in 23 games, is hitting .074 with a 38% strikeout rate. So that's not ideal. Do have to remember this guy is just 23 years old, though, was the former 6th overall pick and remains a top prospect. We got a nice little run here on James's top 400. We had the 23 and 24 prospects earlier. Jordan Lawler is the 22. So the very good prospect, maybe not an inner circle, going to be an all-star every year type of prospect, but the 22nd ranked prospect is a very legitimate young player here. I don't know how much of that we're going to see right away. Again, we haven't seen it in his very limited major league action so far, but in 63 games at the AAA level this season, 11 homers, 20 steals, hitting .313. I guess you could say a 23% strikeout rate is at the level where you figure it's probably going to sit 27, 28 in the majors, which is not great. Probably means he's not going to hit for a great average, but there's some power and plenty of speed here as well. I think Jordan Lawler, I'm quite confident that he's eventually going to be quite a useful fantasy asset. I definitely do have questions about how useful he's going to be this September, but the upside that's there, I think I'd still go grab him in pretty much any league. I wouldn't necessarily throw him in there in a shallower format if I've got good middle infielders, but this is a good talent, one of the better young players who's still going to enter the player pool the remainder of this season. So I do think Jordan Lawler has to be a priority, even if he hasn't yet shown anything at all in limited major league at-bats.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he's been so bad at the major league level that it's hard to have a lot of confidence he's going to figure it out right away. I mean, I think the Diamondbacks thinking here is it's a good time to get him more experience at the big league level, basically prepping him more for a 2026 everyday role. So I'm not counting on a lot of fantasy value down the stretch necessarily, but the upside warrants him being picked up virtually anywhere, and should warn everyone we're going to have a little bit of a drop off here as far as quality goes.
Yes.
We've talked about some pretty exciting names. There is a noticeable drop off here. I'm going with Jared Triolo as my next recommendation. He is the Pirates' new leadoff man, and he's been swinging a very hot bat lately. He recently had a stretch of 5 straight games with multiple hits, slashing .333, .429, .500, a couple of home runs, 4 stolen bases in August. It's a former second-round pick, had a .371 OBP in the minors, so he's not a non-prospect, but he just haven't done a whole lot at the major league level up until now. But in 2025, he does have an 11.8% walk rate and just an 18.9% strikeout rate. Cut that down significantly from where it had been. Could score some runs at the top of that Pirates lineup. Obviously not a great lineup, but if those on-base skills he showed in the minors are finally translating over at the bigger league level, could score some runs for you down the stretch. He has some speed, could offer some stolen bases, and maybe most importantly, he's eligible at 4 different positions. So if you lost a guy like Corey Seager, not ideal replacing him with a guy like Jared Triolo, but it's a profile that could squeeze out some useful fantasy value down the stretch, especially if you're in need of a guy who can fill in it at multiple positions.
Yeah, I think if it weren't for the fact that Triolo had recently moved up to leadoff, I'd be pretty uncomfortable recommending him in this section. But I think that does matter. The extra at-bats, I also would say probably in points leagues, Jared Triolo might be a little more interesting. A lot of points leagues formats care more about walks than a typical roto format. He's always been able to take a walk, even if he doesn't do much when he makes contact with the ball. But strikeout and walk numbers are good. And, of course, extra plate appearances, that matters certainly in a points league as well. So something there for not the shallowest of leagues, but enough leagues for Jared Triolo. My next guy here was mentioned alongside Jared Triolo by Jay Grizz here in the chat, who wanted to pick up Triolo, but instead, with Triolo gone, he went for Gavin Sheets, who is my next name here. I've been a big Gavin Sheets guy this season. I liked him heading into the year as a deep sleeper, just on the thought that, maybe get this guy out of the White Sox organization, you might see something. And we've seen something. In 119 games, he's got 18 homers, hitting a solid 265. He's got a 121 WRC plus, which is his best mark since he had 123 in 54 games as a rookie. He was at an 84 WRC plus the 3 years in between. So I think Gavin Sheets proving again that he is a useful, strong side platoon bat. Problem is, at the deadline, he started losing at bats when the Padres acquired both Ramon Laureano and Ryan O'Hearn. But Sheets has gotten at bats again with Jackson Merrill out. So I think temporarily, as long as Gavin Sheets is there and playing regularly, I do think he's useful even in shallower formats. Unfortunately, Merrill is due to come back pretty soon. So this might be only a very short-term ad for Gavin Sheets. But again, he is hitting pretty well. They weren't giving him enough playing time in August after the deadline, but there's still a chance that they do give him enough playing time down the stretch. So I think you add him, you keep him in the lineup until Jackson Merrill comes back, and then you wait a few days to see. And if Gavin Sheets is still starting against most righties, I think he's going to be pretty useful. The guy can hit, it turns out. Just questions about the role. So as you mentioned, not somebody who we'd necessarily have in the priority section too many weeks this year, but slim pickings, I think, at the plate. You've got another name here. Is he any more exciting?
Yeah, I think it's a similar profile, but a younger player who theoretically still has some upside. And Nolan Gorman has been playing every day for a while now, 15 straight starts, including 2 starts against lefties. Awful start to the season for Nolan Gorman. Had a 583 OPS through the end of May, but he's actually been pretty good since then. Since June 1st, 806 OPS, 12 home runs, 30 RBI in 58 games. Had been batting 4th for the Cardinals regularly. Actually hit cleanup for them last night with Alec Burleson now also out. And the Cardinals are also going to be without Wilson Contreras soon. He's having the appeal of his suspension heard, could be announced at any point how long he's going to be suspended. Nolan Arenado doesn't seem particularly close to returning. So I think Nolan Gorman's got those everyday at-bats locked down for a while now. Has shown some incremental improvements as far as plate discipline goes. He's got an above average chase rate, or below average, however you want to term it. It's better. It's been better. He's chasing less than the league average so far this season for the first time in his career, which is encouraging. Also got that walk rate up to 13.1%. Strikeout rate still a little over 30% at 30.6, but that's actually a pretty significant improvement for him. At a career 34.1% strikeout rate coming into the season. We all know the book on Nolan Gorman. He's liable to go ice cold for the next couple weeks. He just strikes out too much. But he has shown improvement against lefties this season. He's actually got a higher OPS against lefties than he does righties. So looks secure in that everyday role, and he's capable of going on a power binge over the final month. So in your fantasy formats, maybe deeper is a better fit for him. But if you're looking for power, I think you could get on board in a shallower format for Nolan Gorman as well.
And Gorman's eligibility at both second and third, and therefore both middle and corner, makes him a pretty useful end of the roster guy, although that pales in comparison to the eligibility offered by my next guy here, Dylan Moore, who you can play at first, second, third, short, or outfield. So a very good utility option here, which might be what he is going to be for his new organization, the Texas Rangers. Although Texas, we mentioned, without Corey Seager, who's out with an appendectomy, also without Marcus Semien, who could be done for the season with a broken foot and a Liz Frank sprain in the same foot. Playing time seems to be available for Dylan Moore, who can play everywhere. He actually played at first base, I believe, last night. Dylan Moore, a incredibly lopsided player in terms of what he offers you for fantasy. For his career, which now spans 7 seasons, he's a .205 hitter. So if you are in a position where you're trying to make up ground in batting average or trying to not lose it, do not add Dylan Moore. The guy hasn't hit better than .207 in 3 seasons. But for a player who's only a part-time guy who really hits for some of the lowest averages in baseball, he actually offers a lot in some key fantasy categories. If you prorate his career numbers per 600 plate appearances, so if you gave him a full-time role, he'd be at 19 homers and 37 steals. So a guy with lots of speed and some power as well. So if that is the need on your team, if your need is speed and I could use a bit of power as well, and my batting average is not a problem, Dylan Moore actually becomes a pretty useful player here if the playing time is going to be there, as I suspect it will be. I should mention he really was not good with the Mariners at all this season, a .263 OBP before he was let go. So it's possible Dylan Moore is just on his way out of the league. But I think if you need speed and a little bit of power, you could actually do worse than adding Dylan Moore. Because we've talked about a bunch of very unexciting hitters here, I do want to mention a couple others from the chat, like, for example, Colson Montgomery, who's still out there in about 2/3 of Yahoo leagues. I think that I would add him over most of these guys, even as worried as we were about his inability to make contact. He's produced. So in leagues where he's still out there, probably you go get him.
Yeah, I would. I mean, I'm really worried about Colson Montgomery kind of crashing and burning soon, not only because of the potential for swing and miss, but he's also been dealing with a side issue that had him miss the game last week. He missed another, I think, couple games this week before returning last night. Maybe it's more of the Nick Kurtz thing where it's just soreness, not a strain, and he can manage his way through it. But sore side and a lot of swing and miss. I'm not confident that this is going to last, but he's produced so far. So he's, especially given the kind of lackluster compared to other weeks' recommendations as far as position player goes, I think he probably needs to go to the top of the list.
Yeah, we've also had some other mediocre-ish infielders getting mentioned here, like Brooks Lee or Edmundo Sosa. And also, it should be mentioned, where it's nearly September call-up time. So I've seen mentions of Moises Ballesteros in the chat here, or JJ Weatherholt, 2 guys who could get called up. There was a question, Sal Stewart or Justin Crawford getting a potential call-up. Not sure I see it in either case. But maybe Crawford, if the Phillies are just sick of Nick Castellanos, maybe gets a chance. But if you want to just hold on and wait 2 more days until we see those September call-ups rather than picking up Dylan Moore, I think I can get behind that.
Yeah, I think Crawford probably had a better chance if Harrison Bader got off to a bad start, but he's actually been really good for the Phillies. So I think he's pretty much locked into at least semi everyday role with the Phillies now. So I think it's probably unlikely for Crawford. Stewart certainly looks ready for a chance, but they just have so many bodies there I don't know that he can overcome those potential roadblocks to get a chance this season. You're on mute, sir.
Oh, no. Well, everybody wants to hear this next bit because it is our Chalkboard segment. We are brought to you by Chalkboard, and we are going to make some picks using their app for today's games. Those of you following along live can play as well, and those of you listening after the fact can laugh at everything we got wrong. Chalkboard. Cash in on your MLB picks this season with Chalkboard. Simply choose more or less on your favorite player stats to win up to 5,000 times your money. For a limited time only, new players get $20 free with no deposit required. Yes, you heard that right. $20 free just on sign up. See why over 1 million fans have already locked in with Chalkboard to turn their sports knowledge into cold, hard cash. Whether you're locking in the perfect slip with alternate lines, using the cash out feature to take your money and run, or hammering daily promos, today is your chance to win up to $40,000 on a single entry. Stop sitting on the sidelines and get into the game with Chalkboard Fantasy Sports, now available in 30-plus states. Download Chalkboard today and use promo code ROTOMLB, that's ROTOMLB, to get $20 free with no deposit required. Ryan, who do you have for today on your first Chalkboard pick?
Today is going to be the big breakout game for Samuel Basallo, Eric. I just feel it coming. I'm going to take the over. Not been a great start for Basallo so far in the early going for the Orioles, but over under of a 0.5 total bases today. I'm going to take the over there. Orioles are facing the Giants. Carson Seymour is making that start. Pretty decent prospect, Carson Seymour is, but this is his first major league start, and he's not totally stretched out. So this is essentially going to be a bullpen game for the Giants. It's expected to be good hitting weather today in San Francisco. You don't want to. It's the night games there tend to suppress offense more than the day games, and today is a afternoon game there, so better hitting weather in that environment. And Basallo just feels like he's due for a breakout. So especially since we're only looking at a 0.5 total bases, I'll take that.
Yeah, I could certainly get behind that one. I'm going to take us to the mound where I'm going to say Cam Schlittler will go over 5.5 strikeouts today against the White Sox. Now, the White Sox, you might be surprised to learn, are actually middle of the pack in terms of strikeouts. 22% strikeout rate is 16th best out of 30 teams. But if you want to get a lot of strikeouts in a certain game, it's not just the strikeout rate, it's also how deep you can go in the game, and the fact that the White Sox are just unlikely to get many guys on base. They have the 4th worst offense by WRC+, the 4th worst on base percentage. Schlittler should be able to go fairly deep in the game. So if they're only average at striking out, he'll face enough of them to get over 5.5. Schlittler's first 5 starts this season, he only reached the over on this prop twice, but he's done it for each of his last 3. And over those last 3 starts, Cam Schlittler has allowed 1 run on 7 hits across 17 and 2/3 innings. Schlittler really seems to be coming into his own and is actually still available in nearly 40% of Yahoo leagues. So just to tie it into the main topic today, I think Cam Schlittler should be owned in just about 100% of leagues right now. Back to you for your second pick, Ryan.
Yep, love me some Cam Schlittler. Not so much with Jake Irvin. I'm going to stay on the mound and go on the negative side. I'll take the under on 16.5 outs for Jake Irvin today. He went 2 1/3 innings in his last start. He needs to get to 17 outs to hit that over prop, and he's done that once in August. Facing the Rays today, Rays are tied for the 8th highest run projection of the day of all teams. And it's a Rays offense that can kind of run hot and cold, but I just don't think Jake Irvin is very good. And it's asking quite a bit for him to even go 5 2/3 innings. So I'll take the under on the 16.5 outs.
Yeah, sometimes these picks aren't that hard. I just don't think Jake Urban's very good is kind of all you need to say about some of these. To wrap up our chalkboard segment here, I'm going to go Christopher Sanchez over 5.5 strikeouts because I do just think Christopher Sanchez is very good. He did not go over this one in his last start, but he went over it in his 4 starts before that. He's got 4 outings this year where he struck out at least 11 batters. He's reached at least 6, which is all he needs to do in 16 of his 26 outings this season. Christopher Sanchez has just been amazing. He's been the breakout pitcher of the year, and he's not slowing down at all. So that's going to do it for our chalkboard picks today. I also should mention while we're here, the NFFC RotoWire Fantasy Football Online Championship is live. Play fantasy football against your favorite RotoWire experts on NFFC this football season. Jeff Erickson, Nick Whalen, and more will compete in the RotoWire NFFC Online Championship for a shot at $250,000. Sign up for a draft today at rotowire.com/high stakes. That's rotowire.com/high stakes. And man, we know that it must be football season. We've had multiple fantasy football players wandering into the chat today. Sorry that we do not have great advice for you, but I'm sure our RotoWire colleagues will have plenty to offer you there if you can find the correct stream for that. But back to the baseball here. Let's go with our deep league ads of the week, starting on the mound. Ryan, who you got?
I've got Luis Morales. I have him here in the deep league section, mainly just because he qualifies for our criteria of under 50% rostered in TGFBI leagues, but I'm actually okay with him in a shallower format as well. Off to a great start with the Athletics, 1.19 ERA, 0.87 WHIP, got 22 strikeouts, 10 walks, and 22 2/3 innings. Up against the Tigers, his last start went 7 shutout innings, just 2 hits allowed, notched 7 strikeouts. The stuff with Luis Morales is legitimate. He's averaging 97.2 miles per hour with his 4-seamer. His most used secondary pitch is sweeper. He's given up exactly 0 hits on that pitch so far. 27.6% strikeout rate at the minor league level. It's a guy who netted a $3 million signing bonus as an international signee for the Athletics. So he was very highly thought of as an amateur, showing some of that upside now. He's also got a very favorable 2-start week next week. He is at St. Louis, a team that's been very bad offensively for the last couple of months. And then at the Angels later in the week, and that's a team that strikes out a ton. So nice setup for Luis Morales next week. I like him in deep leagues and even in shallower leagues as well.
Yeah, I don't love that home park for Luis Morales, but if he's got a 2-start on the road, that actually could be pretty interesting next week for Luis Morales. I am going to take us to the bullpen, where I've got Andrew Saalfrank here of the Arizona Diamondbacks. Arizona, of course, has had all of their high leverage relievers have been hurt this season. I think that's more or less how it's been. We were not sure who exactly was going to take over the closer job down the stretch, and I don't know if I can say for sure that Andrew Saalfrank has the closer job, but of the Diamondbacks, what is their last 4 saves? He has 2 of them. Is that what it is? They did just have another one last night. So he's the only one with multiple saves in the last few weeks, is I think how I'd put it. He's got 3 since August 13th. They have been spreading them around. Other guys like Jake Woodford has a couple. Taylor Rashi. There's not big names here in this Diamondbacks bullpen is the point that I'm trying to make. And Andrew Saalfrank seems to be at the top of it. In 20 innings this season, a 1.35 ERA and 0.90 WHIP. Those are quite excellent. He owes a lot to a 2.14 BABIP there, but keeps the ball on the ground very well. A 51% ground ball rate for Andrew Saalfrank. doesn't walk guys, a 6.6% walk rate. Unfortunately, doesn't strike guys out either, and doesn't have any velocity. His four-seamer comes in at 89 miles per hour. This is a sinker baller. We talked earlier about how that's not necessarily what managers want to use in the ninth inning, but I think managers don't want to be in a position where they've lost all their high leverage arms for the season. And so when they're in that spot, sometimes you got to use a guy like Andrew Saalfrank. He is a lefty, so maybe this just means this is some sort of committee where he's going to get all the opportunities when lefties are up in the ninth, and some other righties will get some saves as well. I don't think Andrew Saalfrank's going to get every save the remainder of the way for the Diamondbacks, but I do think that they are demonstrating that he's at the top of a committee. So there's a reason he's in the deep league section. This is for if you're desperate for saves. But if you are, I think you could probably do worse than Andrew Saalfrank down the stretch.
Yeah, last week on the podcast, we talked about Joe Boyle getting booted from the Rays rotation and back to AAA. And I mentioned, I hope Ian Seymour gets a shot in his spot. And he did indeed get that opportunity and looked great. His first start, 5 shutout innings. Just 1 hit, 8 strikeouts against the Guardians. He's got a 3.18 ERA, whip just over 1, 30-49 strikeout to walk rate over 28 1/3 innings so far at the big league level. Great numbers in the minors too with Ian Seymour, career 2.53 ERA, 30.5% strikeout rate at the minor league level. He doesn't have much velocity. Kind of sits in the low 90s with his fastball, but he's produced elite quality of contact against so far at the big league level. He's also got a very favorable schedule coming up. His next 3 starts projected to be at Washington, at home against the Guardians that he just pitched well against. That's not an ideal home environment for him, but it's a team that he just dominated in his first start, and then a start after that projected to go up against the White Sox. So favorable setup for Ian Seymour. Don't know exactly how that fastball is going to play against major league hitters, but so far so good, and favorable upcoming schedule. So your deeper leagues, he's worth a look.
Yeah, definitely deeper leagues. I think maybe even in some shallower leagues. I think if we needed more priority pitchers, I was going to ask if I could steal Ian Seymour from you and talk about him up in that first section. I think he's pretty interesting. Of all the guys we're going to talk about in this deep league section, I think he might be my favorite. I'm going to give you another reliever here, another guy who's not amazing, but seems to be at the top of a committee down the stretch, and that's Hogan Harris of the Athletics, who has 2 of the team's last 4 saves. This is a bit of a mess in the post-Mason Miller world. We have Hogan Harris, Elvis Alvarado, and Sean Newcomb as potential closers on the depth chart here at RotoWire. Other guys like Tyler Ferguson and even Osvaldo Bido have picked up saves recently. I don't think Harris is going to get you a ton of saves down the stretch, but he's pitched pretty well each of the last 2 seasons, at least if you trust the ERA. It was a 2.86 ERA last year in a swingman role, 3.58 this year in his first season in the bullpen. Problem is, too many walks, double-digit walk rates both seasons, a whip all the way up to 149 this season. So I cannot give a ringing endorsement on Hogan Harris, who also, I should mention, is a lefty. There's another lefty who's maybe at the top of a closer committee down the stretch. Strikeouts are better than average, but at 24%, not exactly closer material. But again, not every team has great high leverage arms this time of year. Sometimes you get Andrew Saalfrank and Hogan Harris closing games. So I think if you're desperate for saves and scrounging around for any committee leaders, seems like Hogan Harris is going to be one of those options. Again, only for those desperate for saves. I hope you can do better, but this is why we're on to deep league pitchers in late August. Sometimes you recommend Hogan Harris. I imagine you're not going to give a ringing endorsement to him.
Yeah, that bullpen is just pretty messy. I know I mentioned Elvis Alvarado a couple episodes ago as a potential option there, but I don't have a ton of confidence in anyone in that bullpen, frankly. going to go with another Orioles starter. Led off with Kyle Bradish in the priority section. The deeper section, I'm going to go with Tyler Wells. Remember him? Set for his first Major League start Tuesday at San Diego, first since April of 2024, making his way back from UCL surgery. Has looked really good on his rehab assignment, 2.49 ERA, 24 strikeouts, 6 walks over 25 and a third innings. Went 6 1/3 innings. His last rehab outing allowed just 2 runs and struck out 5. So he's pretty stretched out. And he was a good pitcher before getting hurt. 3.64 ERA, had a whip under 1, 117, 34 strikeout to walk rate over 118 and 2/3 innings in 2023, his last full season. Kind of Bailey Ober-esque, hopefully the good version of Bailey Ober is Tyler Wells, in that he's a very tall, I think he's 6'8", righty who doesn't throw very hard, is an extreme fly ball pitcher, but also great control and tends to get maybe not as much swing and miss as the good version of Bailey Ober, but similar in that he throws a ton of strikes. And I think he could be a pretty useful asset down the stretch if he shows that command he had pre-surgery is back.
Yeah, I could definitely get behind that. I mean, maybe you add Tyler Wells and sit on him for the first week, just because, like we talked about, guys coming back from surgery, you kind of want to see it. But as we also discussed, there's not a lot of time left. So I can understand adding Tyler Wells and just using him right away. Let's move finally to our deep league hitters, where I'm going to kick things off with Luis Matos, outfielder for the Giants, who was recently recalled about 10 days ago. Luis Matos was a pretty interesting prospect before his call-up a couple years ago because he makes a ton of contact. He was running strikeout rates in 7, 8, 9% range prior to his debut in the minors, up to 14% at the AAA level this season. Through parts of 3 seasons in the big leagues, Matos is showing contact ability, a 14% career strikeout rate, 15% in 48 games this year. Has not translated to a good batting average, which is kind of strange, a 232 average for his career, 222 this season. But if you tell me a guy is striking out just 14, 15% of the time, I'm going to bet on at least a decent enough batting average going forward. The reasons why you might not get one is if a guy has truly bottom of the scale hard hit metrics. And that was true 2 years ago. He had a 2% barrel rate, 31% hard hit rate. But this season, in 48 games, the hard hit rate up to 38% for Matos, the barrel rate actually all the way up to 9%. So if you give me a 9% barrel rate combined with a 15% strikeout rate, that tends to be a pretty good hitter. He actually has shown surprising power for his profile, 8 homers in those 48 games this season. He's got a even 100 WRC plus, and it pretty much all comes from slugging because he's on base at just a 263 clip. But I think there's a lot more here, and I think with regular at-bats down the stretch, with the Giants team that's fallen out of contention and should be focusing on things like trying to see what they have in Luis Matos, the guy's still just 23 years old. So I'm going to bet on a 23-year-old with a very good ability to make contact and figure that he is going to actually be a pretty useful player once he gets an extended run here. So I like Luis Matos as a deep league hitter. I should mention we got a question in the chat about Luis Matos right at the start, wondering if we should drop Addison Barger for Matos or other hitters like Matt Wallner or Jeremiah Jackson. Barger has not been the same guy he was in the first half recently, but I think he's still above Luis Matos for me. How about you?
Yeah, I would stick with Barger. You could probably talk me into cutting him for Matt Wallner in certain leagues, and they're, I think, fairly similar hitters when they're going well, and Wallner's going well right now and Barger's not. But I think if you force me to pick one of the two, I would still side with Barger.
Yeah, fair enough. Who is your top deep league hitter this week, Ryan?
Got Hyesung Kim on the way back for the Dodgers. Looks like he's going to be activated at the beginning of next week, returning from that shoulder injury. What's his role going to be? Dave Roberts has talked about giving him more looks in left field, where Michael Conforto continues to be terrible, but also continues to continue playing every day, or not every day, but every day against righties. And Kim, before getting hurt, doing quite well, 304, 338, 406 slash line, a couple home runs, 12 for 12 in stolen base attempts. The batted ball data with Kim has been not great. Also striking out too much. Strikeout rate is up almost to 30%. That's not ideal. I don't know how much the offense is gonna hold. He had already kind of started to tail off a little bit before getting hurt, but I love the stolen base upside with him. Going to be part of a good lineup. Also triple eligible. So if he gets those regular at bats for the Dodgers, which I think there's a good chance he will, I think he could still be a pretty useful fantasy asset, even if he regresses some from an offensive standpoint.
Yeah, I think there should be something there with Hyesung Kim. Would like to see him get a run of pretty regular at-bats down the stretch here. My remaining deep league hitters are just returning from or about to return from injury, which means I probably should have mentioned Anthony Santander, who is closing in on a return from his injury. He's been out since late May with a shoulder subluxation. He has not yet begun a rehab assignment. That's about to come, though, so maybe not this week, but maybe if you want to stash him. I should note Anthony Santander was quite poor in 50 games before the injury, hit 179, slugged just 304. So you could add him now, sit on him for a week, and hope he's back. Or you could add Johnny DeLuca, who is my next name here. Johnny DeLuca about to return from a hamstring injury. He has started a rehab assignment, and he hasn't been out for all that long. He's just been gone just over 3 weeks, so I would expect his rehab assignment won't be very long. Questions about how much he'll play when he comes back. Jake Mangum is getting regular play in center field. DeLuca has battled multiple injuries this season, has not really had an extended run, but was getting, I believe, every day at bats just before going down. In 20 games this season, DeLuca is actually hitting 333 with 6 steals and 812 OPS. I don't know for sure that he's going to start every day or even most games when he gets back, but I just don't think Jake Mangum is really all that good. It's got a decent glove, but there's just not much at the plate there at all. Mangum, a 2.6% barrel rate this season. He's just a batting average guy and not even that special there. I think Johnny DeLuca has more upside. He doesn't have much power, though, to be fair, a 4% career barrel rate. So guy who can run a lot, though, and is about to come back. I think he can help some fantasy teams as long as there's enough playing time in the final couple weeks.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Jimmy Crooks. My last recommendation. I'm not confident that he's going to get the playing time. The Cardinals have a disturbing amount of affinity for Pedro Pajes, so I don't know that Jimmy Crooks is going to get those regular looks. But if he does, I think he has a potential to be a pretty interesting offensive player. 274, 337, 441 this season at AAA Memphis. And he had been scorching hot in August, slashing 337, 404, 518 with 3 home runs. He was the Texas League MVP last year in 2024 at the AA level, slashed 321, 410, 498 with 11 home runs in 90 games. Might ultimately be more of a doubles hitter at the major league level, but there is some pop there. Can draw some walks. He's posted good OBPs in the minors. Again, I'm not super confident the playing time is going to be there, but Joel Pozo out with a concussion, and Cardinals seem to be basically giving up on Ivan Herrera as a catcher at this point. So if Jimmy Crooks does get those regular reps, at least against right-handed pitching, he is a left-handed hitter, I should mention. I think he could be worth rostering at least in two catcher formats.
Yeah, Von Herrera, who you mentioned, stuck on 14 games. So he just needs one more behind the plate in leagues that use 15 as the cutoff. It's possible, but doesn't seem like it's going to happen. And in leagues where you need 20, which is the default over at NFBC and many other places, that seems to be not really a possibility down the stretch. So we're going to be looking at Ivan Herrera, the DH, next season. I've got one more name for you here, and then maybe a bonus because I'm not too excited about either of these guys. But Connor Norby has just made it back from wrist surgery. He had a fractured hamate bone that had kept him out since right around the All-Star break. Connor Norby, somebody we had gotten somewhat excited about at times. He's shown hints, but he hasn't really put it all together. In the last two seasons, he's played 118 games, so about 3/4 of a campaign, 15 homers, 10 steals. I mean, you can see an outline here of a guy who's pretty interesting, only hitting 241 for his career. 29% strikeout rate is a problem. An 11% barrel rate is good, but generally not necessarily high enough to offset a strikeout rate in that range. But the strikeouts were at 33% as a rookie, down to 26.6% this season. So Norby starting to make more contact. Shouldn't really be anything in the way of seeing what he can do down the stretch with regular at-bats. And this was a fairly interesting prospect who is still just 25 years old. So I think down the stretch, I would want to give a chance to Connor Norby. And I'll throw in my bonus name too. Zach Geloff is back with the Athletics. Zach Geloff is hitting 128 and striking out 50% of the time in 12 games this season. We know Zach Geloff does not hit for a high average, doesn't even hit for a low average. He hits for something below that, but there is power and speed here. And he's getting the playing time. Maybe Zach Geloff fits a couple teams. This is the off-brand version of Dylan Moore, though, at this point, which is not really what we want. But I think that's going to do it for us today, unless there are any last names in the chat you want to throw out here.
I just wanted to throw this out there. Mackenzie Gore just went on the IL. That's a left shoulder inflammation. So could be a season ender there. He could technically come back for a few starts, but he had been trending in a very poor direction. So that combined with a shoulder issue going on the IL, I think he's probably okay to drop.
Yeah, Mackenzie Gore, one of the stories of the early part of the season. If this is it for him, he's going to finish the year with a 4.15 ERA and a 1.34 WHIP. Rather ordinary stats in the end. But thank you to everybody who hung out in the chat today. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you to our sponsors, Chalkboard and the NFFC. That's going to do it for today's show. But the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast will be back tomorrow with Jeff and Scott going over this weekend's fab.